I'm standing in my front yard at 7:30 a.m. on a Saturday, still in my Batman pajama pants and a coffee-stained t-shirt, facing off with a woman clutching a measuring tape and a clipboard. She's wearing a tennis outfit that probably costs more than my monthly mortgage payment, despite the fact that I've never once seen her hold a racket. Her name is Sandra Wheeler. Everyone just calls her Karen, but not to her face. 47 inches, Sandra says, extending the measuring tape from my mother's garden gnome to the edge of the flower bed. She clicks her pen dramatically. The sound is way too loud in the morning quiet. The HOA bylaws clearly state decorative lawn ornaments cannot exceed 42 inches in height, or be placed within 6 feet of the property line. This is a violation on 2 counts. My mother appears beside me in her fuzzy pink robe, clutching her memory tablet, the $1,200 specialized device that helps her remember everything from taking medication to recognizing family members since her Alzheimer's diagnosis. It's her anchor. "That's Ferdinand," Mom says, pointing to the gnome. His little painted red hat is slightly askew. "He's been with me for 30 years. Her voice carries that slight tremor that appears when she's upset, like a little bird trapped in her chest. "I don't care if it's the Pope," Sandra replies, her voice sharp, cutting through the morning air. "It's a violation. Remove it by Monday or face a $200 fine." She turns to leave. Her movement's quick and dismissive, but she bumps into Mom. It's not a huge shove, but it's enough. Mom stumbles back a step, her hands instinctively tightening on the tablet. It slips. The precious device arcs through the air, a slow-motion nightmare against the backdrop of Sandra's pristine white tennis skirt. It hits the concrete driveway with a sickening crack. It shatters into a dozen pieces. The screen spiders out from the point of impact, a web of destruction. Mom starts crying immediately, a small, lost sound that tears through me. She just stares at the broken glass, her face crumpling like a discarded tissue. I'm speechless. My throat is tight, burning. I can't believe what just happened. And from the corner of my eye, I notice Mr. Harrison, my new next-door neighbor who I've barely spoken to, watching the entire scene unfold from his porch while drinking his morning coffee. He's just watching. Little did Sandra know she'd just destroyed the most important possession of an Alzheimer's patient in front of a recently retired district court judge. And little did she know I wasn't going to just stand there and let her get away with it. Selling my mom's house was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Not because it was hard logistically, but because it felt like I was selling off her memories, piece by piece. 40 years she lived in that house. 40 years of holidays, birthdays, scraped knees, and quiet evenings on the porch swing. It was her sanctuary. But the Alzheimer's had gotten worse. Much worse. The house was too big, too confusing, too full of hidden dangers she no longer recognized. The doctor had been clear. She needed constant care, a stable environment. My small 2-bedroom house in this upscale suburban neighborhood was the only option. Moving day was a blur of controlled chaos, movers tromping through rooms that smelled faintly of Mom's lavender perfume, the scent clinging to the air like a ghost. They were careful, mostly, but I winced when I heard the crash from the living room, Grandma's porcelain vase, the one Mom always said was priceless. Just another piece of the past shattered. Mom kept asking the same questions over and over. "Where are we going? Why are these men here? Did I forget something?" Each time I'd gently take her hand, look her in the eye, and explain. "We're moving, Mom, to my house. It's going to be okay. This is your new home now." Her eyes would clear for a second, a flicker of understanding, before the fog rolled back in. The memory tablet was Dr. Chen's idea. A neurologist specializing in Alzheimer's, she said it could give Mom a sense of independence. It was programmed with reminders for her medication, appointments, even simple things like when to eat or drink water. It had photos of family members with their names, a calendar, and pre-recorded messages from me and other family members reminding her she was loved and safe. It was expensive, ridiculously expensive. But it was a lifeline. It was hope in a sleek metal shell. When we first arrived, some neighbors were welcoming. Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street brought over a pie and promised to keep an eye out. A few other people waved and smiled. But I saw the looks too. The quick glances at Mom, the hushed whispers, the way some people quickly averted their eyes when she seemed confused. This neighborhood, with its perfectly manicured lawns and identical mailboxes, valued order. Mom, with her unpredictable moments and worn, fuzzy robe, was a variable they weren't sure they liked. The welcome packet from the HOA arrived a few days later. It was 47 pages of rules. 47 pages detailing everything from approved paint colors, 8 shades of beige mostly, to the exact height of shrubbery. I skimmed it, my eyes glazing over. It seemed excessive, but harmless. I shoved it in a drawer and forgot about it. My first encounter with Sandra Wheeler, the infamous HOA president, was at the mailbox. I was just pulling out a stack of junk mail when she power-walked up, her blonde bob perfectly in place, a blinding smile plastered on her face. "Hello, you must be the new resident," she chirped, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Sandra Wheeler, HOA president. Welcome to the neighborhood." "Mike Lawson," I said, shaking her hand. Her grip was surprisingly firm. "Lovely to have you," she said, her eyes scanning my yard. Her smile tightened slightly. "Though I must say your landscaping could use a little attention. We do have standards, you know. Keeps the property values up. My blood pressure spiked a little. I'd just moved my mother in. My life was a hurricane of change and stress, and this woman's first comment was about my grass?" "Yeah, I'll get to it," I mumbled, pulling my hand away. "Excellent," she said, her smile widening, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page." She gave a little wave and power-walked away. I watched her go, a knot forming in my stomach. Something told me being on the same page with Sandra Wheeler was going to be harder than it sounded. Meanwhile, my new next-door neighbor, an older man with kind eyes and a shock of white hair, was watering his immaculate rose bushes. He gave me a small, genuine smile and a nod. "Afternoon," he said. "Hey," I replied. "Mike?" "Richard," he said, his voice quiet and calm. "Welcome to the neighborhood." He didn't mention the yard, or the moving truck, or anything else. Just a simple welcome. I appreciated that. He seemed peaceful. The opposite of Sandra. That evening, Mom was particularly confused. We were sitting in the living room, the space feeling unfamiliar and not quite ours yet. She kept looking around, her eyes darting from the furniture to the windows. "Mike," she said, her brow furrowed. "Why are we here? Are we visiting someone?" I took her hand, holding it gently. "No, Mom, we live here now. This is our home, remember? You moved in with me." She looked at me, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "My home? But where's Ferdinand? Is he here?" My chest ached. Ferdinand the gnome. He was still packed away. "He's here, Mom. All your things are here. We'll unpack them tomorrow." She squeezed my hand. "Okay, good." She paused. Then her eyes widened slightly. "Are you Mike? You look like Mike." A lump formed in my throat. "Yeah, Mom, I'm Mike. You're Mike." She smiled, a sweet, fragile smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Okay, Mike. It's a nice house. Is it yours?" "It's ours now, Mom. It's our home." We sat there for a while, the silence punctuated by the ticking of the old grandfather clock I'd brought from her house. It was going to be a long road. I just hoped I was strong enough to walk it with her. And I hoped this neighborhood, with its rules and its Sandras, wouldn't make it any harder than it already was. Life settled into a weird rhythm. I was a graphic designer, working from home, which was a blessing and a curse. Blessing because I could be here with Mom. Curse because trying to focus on deadlines while also making sure she took her pills, didn't wander off, and didn't accidentally set the kitchen on fire was challenging. My work suffered, clients got impatient, money got tighter than I liked. The HOA wasted no time reminding me they existed. My first official warning letter arrived a week after the move. It was about the garbage cans. Apparently, they were visible from the street on non-pickup days, a clear violation of bylaw 3.7b. I had to buy an expensive, ugly plastic shed to hide them, another few $100s down the drain. The yard was a constant battle. I wasn't a gardener. My idea of landscaping was mowing the grass when it got too long, but the HOA had expectations. Impeccable edges, perfectly trimmed bushes, not a single weed in sight. I was drowning. I ended up hiring a local kid, Josh, to help with the yard work. He was maybe 16, all lanky limbs and awkward smiles. He seemed eager, though. I paid him $20 an hour, which was a stretch, but I needed the help. One Saturday morning, Josh was out there with the mower, trying his best. I was inside on a video call with a client, trying to explain why I was late with a design proof. Suddenly, I heard a loud yell, followed by a shriek. I ran outside, the client's voice still squawking from my laptop, which I dropped on the couch. Sandra Wheeler was standing on the property line, her face a mask of pure fury. Josh was standing dumbfounded beside the mower, pointing at a mangled bush. "He mowed my roses!" Sandra screeched, pointing a trembling finger at Josh. "My prize-winning hybrid tea roses. They were encroaching onto your property, Mike, but that does not give you the right to destroy them." Josh stammered. I thought they were weeds, ma'am. They were really spiky." "Weeds? These are exquisite, award-winning blooms," Sandra shrieked. I stepped between them. "Okay, Sandra, calm down. It was an accident. Josh thought he was doing what he was supposed to do." "An accident? He deliberately vandalized my property." Mom came out onto the porch, drawn by the noise. She looked confused, clutching the unbroken tablet. "What's wrong? Why is that woman yelling?" Sandra turned to Mom, her face softening for just a second. The fury drained away, replaced by a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. Pity? Discomfort? "Hello, Barbara," she said, her voice losing some of its edge. Mom just blinked at her. "Do I know you?" The brief moment of softness vanished. Sandra's face hardened again. "It seems your mother is having a moment, Mike. Perhaps you should attend to her, and then you can deal with the destruction your hired help has caused." She spun on her heel and marched back to her house. Josh looked at me, his eyes wide. "Dude, I am so sorry. She is intense." "Tell me about it," I sighed, running a hand through my already messy hair. The roses were definitely destroyed, and I knew this wouldn't be the last I heard of it. But for that 1 second, seeing Sandra's reaction to Mom, it showed me she wasn't just a cartoon villain. She was complicated. Still awful, but maybe complicated. Later that week, I met with a contractor about building a memory garden for Mom. I'd read about them online, gardens designed specifically for people with Alzheimer's, with sensory plants, safe paths, and familiar objects to help with memory and orientation. It sounded perfect. A small piece of the outside world where Mom could feel safe and stimulated. The contractor, a burly guy named Ray who looked like he'd wrestled bears for a living, listened patiently as I explained what I wanted. He nodded, chewing on a toothpick. "Sounds like a good idea, Mike," he said when I finished. "Real good for folks with Alzheimer's." He paused, looking towards Sandra's house next door. "Gotta warn you, though. You'll need HOA approval for any major landscaping changes, and the president of this HOA, Well, let's just say she's got a reputation. He proceeded to tell me horror stories. Approvals held up for months over minor details, fines for potted plants being on the porch too long, neighbors forced to tear down perfectly good decks because they weren't the approved wood type. Ray had seen it all. She sounds thorough, I said weakly. Thorough ain't the word I'd use, Ray grunted. She's a tyrant. Runs the board with an iron fist. If you want this garden, you gotta dot every single I and cross every it. And even then, it's a toss-up. I felt my optimism draining away, but I had to try. For Mom. I had Ray draw up detailed plans, making sure they were meticulously within every setback requirement and used only approved materials. I submitted the plans to the HOA board the following week, a thick packet of blueprints and plant lists. A few days later, I was watering my sad-looking lawn when Mr. Harrison from next door called out. Mike, got some extra tomatoes if you want them. He was on his porch holding a basket overflowing with bright red tomatoes. Oh, wow, thanks, Richard, I said, walking over. Please call me Rich, he said, handing me the basket. His hands were strong, calloused, gardener's hands. Just picked these this morning. Thought they might go to waste. This is great, I said, genuinely grateful. Mom loves tomatoes. We chatted for a few minutes about the weather, the challenges of growing things in the suburban soil, nothing heavy. He asked how Mom was settling in, and I gave him the Jian Lu, brief version. Some good days, some bad. He listened, really listened. He mentioned he'd just retired recently and was enjoying having more time for his garden. He didn't say what he retired from, and I didn't ask. He just seemed like a nice, quiet older guy who liked gardening. I had no idea just how much that quiet exterior hid. Submitting the garden plans felt like throwing a message in a bottle into a very bureaucratic ocean. Ray's warnings echoed in my head. I hoped they'd just approve it. Please, just let this one thing be easy. The ocean didn't just ignore my bottle. It threw it back at me with a vengeance. The HOA's response to the garden plans was a 2-page letter detailing 12 separate technicalities that caused the rejection. The proposed height of the small decorative fence was 1 inch too tall. The placement of a bird bath was 6 inches too close to the property line. A plant I'd selected for its sensory properties wasn't on the approved plant list. It was ridiculous. Ray said it was typical Sandra. Find tiny things to reject it on, hoping you'll give up. I didn't give up. Ray and I modified the plans, addressing every single point, no matter how petty. We resubmitted. The waiting game started again. Meanwhile, Sandra's nitpicking of my property intensified. It wasn't just the gnomes anymore. She sent a letter about the color of my house paint. It was off-white, she claimed, but the approved color was eggshell. I literally held up the paint swatch to my house and they were identical. Another letter claimed my mailbox was non-regulation. It was a standard black mailbox. Apparently, the approved mailbox had a slightly different shaped flag. It felt like she was inventing things just to harass me. I vented to my best friend, Dave, over beers on my back porch. Mom was asleep inside, the house quiet for once. She's unbelievable, man, I said, swirling the beer in my glass. The paint color, the mailbox, it's insane. Dave, a perpetual optimist with a mischievous streak, grinned. Sounds like you need to fight back, subtly. How do I subtly fight a woman who measures my gnomes? You play by the rules, Dave said, his eyes sparkling. But you make the rules work for you, or at least make them as annoying as possible for her. He started throwing out ideas. Plant wild flowers instead of boring grass. They're technically plants. Can't fine you for plants. Install solar lights, but make sure they're exactly at the height limit. Not a millimeter over. A smile started to creep onto my face. So, technically legal but annoying? Precisely, Dave said, clinking his bottle against mine. Give her rules to enforce, but make them infuriatingly difficult. I liked the idea. It felt less confrontational than yelling back, but it was still a way to push back against her control. I started with the wildflowers. I ripped up a section of the pristine, water-guzzling grass and sowed seeds for a mix of colorful wildflowers. They were a riot of color, messy and cheerful, a stark contrast to the uniform green lawns around me. I put in solar lights along the walkway, carefully measuring each one to be precisely at the maximum allowed height. Around this time, Mom had a stretch of good days, the kind where she seemed more like her old self. She'd hum along to old songs, tell stories that actually made sense, and her eyes held a familiar spark. During one of these good periods, she became fixated on decorating the front yard. She loved her garden gnomes. She had a whole collection, accumulated over decades. There was Ferdinand, of course, but also a grumpy-looking one she called Bartholomew, a tiny female gnome with a watering can named Penelope, and a few others. She started placing them in the front yard herself. Carefully, deliberately, Ferdinand went right back in his favorite spot near the flower bed. Bartholomew went under the oak tree. Penelope sat on the porch step. I saw her doing it. I knew logically that this would cause problems. Sandra had already flagged Ferdinand. But seeing the joy on Mom's face as she placed them, talking to each one as if they were old friends, I couldn't stop her, not when she was having a good day, not when she was finding a little piece of her old self in this new, confusing place. I just let her do it. And I waited for the inevitable. The inevitable came in the form of Sandra's car. She started driving by the house multiple times a day, slowly. I'd see her out of the corner of my eye, her head swiveling, her phone held up, taking pictures, documenting my subtle rebellion and Mom's unauthorized gnome village. It felt like I was living under a microscope. The neighborhood started to feel charged. You could feel the tension in the air. Some neighbors, tired of Sandra's overreach, gave me small smiles, a thumbs up, or a quiet word of encouragement. Hang in there, Mike. Don't let her push you around. Others, the ones who valued conformity above all else, avoided eye contact or gave me disapproving looks. They were firmly on Sandra's side. The gnomes and the wildflowers had become a symbol of defiance. And through it all, Mr. Harrison, Rich, the quiet neighbor, observed. I'd see him on his porch, reading the paper or watering his roses. He'd wave, a calm, neutral presence in the growing storm. He didn't say anything about the gnomes or the wildflowers or Sandra's drive-bys. He just watched. I had no idea the depth of his observation, or how crucial it would become. The morning of the breaking point started like any other Saturday. I was enjoying the rare luxury of a slow morning, the smell of coffee in the air, Mom still asleep. Then I saw Sandra's car pull up. And I knew. I went outside, still in my Batman pajama pants and coffee-stained t-shirt. Sandra was already there, measuring tape out, clipboard in hand. The scene unfolded exactly as it had in my nightmares. The measuring, the citing of bylaws, the cold, dismissive tone. 47 inches, she announced, that same dramatic pen click. The HOA bylaws clearly state decorative lawn ornaments cannot exceed 42 inches in height or be placed within 6 feet of the property line. This is a violation on 2 counts. Mom came out then, drawn by the sound of voices holding the tablet. That's Ferdinand, she said, her voice small. He's been with me for 30 years. I don't care if it's the Pope, Sandra replied, her voice sharp. It's a violation. Remove it by Monday or face a $200 fine. And then she turned. Too fast. Bumped Mom. The tablet, Mom's anchor, her connection to the world, flew from her grasp. The crash, the shatter, the sound is burned into my memory. Mom's cry. It wasn't loud, but it was full of such deep, childlike pain. She just stood there, staring at the pieces, tears streaming down her face. "It's broken," she whispered, her voice trembling. My book, it's broken?" I knelt beside her, my own eyes stinging. "I know, Mom, I know, it's okay, we'll fix it." But looking at the shattered screen, I knew I probably couldn't. Sandra just stood there, her face a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Well, that's unfortunate," she said, her tone lacking any real sympathy. "Perhaps she shouldn't be handling expensive electronics if she's prone to dropping them." I stood up, my hands clenched into fists. "You did that, Sandra." My voice was low, but it vibrated with anger. "You bumped her." "It was an accident," she said, straightening her tennis skirt. "She was too close. She was standing in her own yard." "Regardless, the gnome is still in violation. You have until Monday." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with my crying mother and the shattered remains of the only thing that gave her a sense of independence. The rest of the day was a nightmare. Mom was inconsolable at first, then she became agitated. Without the tablet's reminders, she forgot to take her afternoon medication. She kept asking where her book was, her distress growing each time I had to tell her it was broken. That night she got lost in the house, ending up in the basement, confused and scared. I spent hours trying to recover the data from the tablet. I watched YouTube videos, downloaded recovery software. Nothing worked. The impact had been too severe. The memory card was likely corrupted. All the carefully curated photos, the reminders, the pre-recorded messages. Gone. Just gone. The knot in my stomach tightened with a fresh wave of panic. This wasn't just a broken gadget. This was a medical device. This was her memory aid. Without it, her condition seemed to worsen almost immediately. I had to take time off work to care for her. My clients were understanding at first, but the missed deadlines piled up. The financial stress already present became a crushing weight. Replacing the tablet alone would be over $1,000, and that didn't even account for the cost of trying to recover the data, if that was even possible. And then, adding insult to injury, another violation notice arrived in the mail, from Sandra, demanding the removal of the gnomes by Monday, threatening the $200 fine. She didn't even mention the tablet. I tried calling her. She didn't answer. I left a message, my voice shaking with frustration and anger, explaining what had happened and demanding she pay for the damage. She didn't call back. I went to the police station. I felt a little foolish, filing a report about a broken tablet. But it was property damage, right? Officer Diaz, a young cop with kind eyes, listened patiently. I explained everything about Mom's Alzheimer's, the importance of the tablet, Sandra's behavior. He was sympathetic. "Look, Mr. Lawson," he said, his voice gentle. "I understand completely. My own father has dementia. It's a tough road." He paused. "But this is really a civil matter. Property damage like this, especially when it's debatable if it was intentional. It's not something we typically press charges for. You'd likely have to pursue this in small claims court." My heart sank. Court? Lawyers? I couldn't afford that. Officer Diaz saw my expression. He pushed a few brochures across the desk. "Here are some resources for caregivers of people with Alzheimer's. There are support groups and some organizations that can help with finding affordable technology solutions." He was trying to be helpful, and I appreciated it, but it felt like a dead end. I walked home, defeated. The gnomes still stood defiantly in the front yard. Ferdinand sans his trusty tablet guardian. As I walked up the driveway, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders, Rich Harrison was walking across his lawn, carrying a casserole dish. "Mike," he said, a look of concern on his face. "Heard some commotion the other day. Everything all right?" I looked at the casserole, then at his kind face, and I just cracked a little. The stress, the anger, the helplessness, it all welled up. No, Rich, it's not all right. Sandra, she broke Mom's memory tablet, the one that helps her remember things. It's shattered. His expression changed. The casual, neighborly concern deepened into something else. He looked serious, deliberate. I saw it, he said, his voice quiet but firm. From my porch, saw the whole thing. He paused, looking directly at me. Mike, I'm Richard Harrison. For 30 years I was a district court judge specializing in civil disputes. He gestured to the casserole. Let me put this inside. I think I might be able to help. My jaw dropped. The quiet gardener next door? A retired judge? The world suddenly tilted on its axis. Hope, a fragile little bird, fluttered in my chest. Rich led me inside. He placed the casserole on the counter, the smell of baked goodness filling the air. Mom was sitting on the couch, looking lost, flipping through a magazine she couldn't read. Barbara, Rich said gently. Mom looked up, a flicker of recognition. Hello, Richard? He smiled. Mike and I are just going to talk for a bit. We went into the dining room. The shattered tablet was still on the table where I'd been trying in vain to fix it. Rich looked at it, his expression somber. That's a terrible thing, Mike, he said, sitting down, especially knowing how important it was. He looked at me, his gaze steady. Officer Diaz was right. This is a civil matter, but that doesn't mean you don't have options. Small claims court is designed for situations like this. You represent yourself, the rules are simplified. The amount you can claim is limited, but it might be enough to cover a replacement. He explained the process. How I needed to file a claim, serve Sandra, present my case to a judge. It sounded daunting, but Rich made it sound possible. You need to gather evidence, he said. The cost of the tablet. Medical documentation from your mother's doctor stating its necessity. Any evidence of the incident itself? Evidence. I had the broken tablet, obviously. I had the receipt. I needed something proving how vital it was. And I needed something about the incident. My doorbell camera, I said suddenly. I have a camera by the front door. It records motion. Perfect, Rich said, a hint of a smile. That could be crucial. Over the next few days, I became a detective. I contacted the electronics store where I bought the tablet and got an official statement confirming the model, its cost, and the fact that data recovery was unlikely and expensive given the damage. I called Dr. Chen's office. I explained what happened. Dr. Chen was amazing. She immediately understood the severity of the situation. She dictated a letter for me, detailing Mom's Alzheimer's, the specific ways the tablet aided her memory and independence, and the significant negative impact its loss would have on her cognitive function and daily life. It was a powerful letter, clinical, yet deeply empathetic. The doorbell camera footage was damning. It showed Sandra arriving, the confrontation about the gnome, the bump, Mom stumbling, the tablet falling, shattering. You could hear Mom's cry, my angry voice, Sandra's dismissive reply. It was all there, in crisp, undeniable video evidence. Rich reviewed everything. This is a strong case, Mike, he said, nodding, especially with the doctor's letter and the video. It shows the tablet wasn't just a toy, and it shows Sandra was directly involved in its destruction. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for that week. Rich suggested I attend and attempt to address the issue formally. Give them a chance to rectify this outside of court, he advised. It also shows you made a good faith effort. The meeting was held in the neighborhood clubhouse, a sterile room filled with uncomfortable folding chairs. Sandra sat at the head of the table, flanked by other board members. Most of them avoided my eyes. When it was my turn to speak during the open forum, I stood up, clutching my doctor's letter and the electronic store statement. I explained calmly what had happened, the importance of the tablet to my mother's health and well-being, and the fact that Sandra's actions had destroyed it. I requested the HOA compensate me for the cost of a replacement and data recovery. Before I could even finish, Sandra cut me off. "This is not an appropriate forum for personal grievances, Mr. Lawson. This is about HOA business, and your gnomes are still in violation." "This is HOA business," I argued, my voice rising despite myself. "The HOA president destroyed my property." "There was an unfortunate incident involving your mother's device," Sandra said, her tongue-in-cheek cold and detached. "Accidents happen, and your persistent violation of the landscaping bylaws is the actual issue here." The other board members shifted in their seats, clearly uncomfortable. One woman, Elaine, a quiet older lady, looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. The meeting moved on, my issue dismissed. As I was leaving, feeling defeated again, Elaine approached me quietly. "Mike," she whispered, glancing nervously at Sandra, who was packing up her papers. "I'm so sorry about that, and about your mother's tablet. Sandra. She's been out of control lately, but the rest of us, we're just afraid to challenge her. She makes things very difficult." It wasn't much, but it was something. A crack in Sandra's armor. It showed me not everyone on the board was aligned with her. I told Dave and Ray about the meeting. Dave was indignant. "Afraid of Karen? Give me a break. This calls for public pressure." He immediately set up a neighborhood online petition titled "Justice for Ferdinand and Barbara's Tablet," detailing the incident and calling for Sandra to be held accountable. It spread like wildfire through neighborhood social media groups. Ray, ever the pragmatist, had a different approach. "While Dave's stirring the pot, I'll do some digging. Nobody's yard is perfectly to code, especially not hers." Ray had a knack for spotting building code violations and property line discrepancies. He promised to see if Sandra had any skeletons in her meticulously manicured closet. That evening, I had dinner with Mom. She was having a relatively good day. We were eating Rich's delicious casserole. "This is good, Mike," she said, a genuine smile on her face. "Rich Harrison made it," I said. "Oh, Richard," she nodded. "Nice man. He helps me with the gnomes sometimes." My heart squeezed. She remembered that. Then, out of nowhere, she looked at me, her eyes clear and sharp. It was one of those breakthrough moments. "Don't let that woman push you around, Mike," she said, her voice firm. "The one who broke my book." I was stunned. "You remember that, Mom?" "I remember she was mean," Mom said, her gaze steady. "And she broke my book that helped me remember things. Don't let her get away with it. I raised you stronger than that." Tears welled up in my eyes. It was the most coherent, focused thing she'd said in weeks. It was my mom, the woman who had taught me to stand up for myself, cutting through the fog of Alzheimer's to give me strength. "I won't, Mom," I promised, my voice thick. "I promise." Fueled by Mom's words and the growing support from some neighbors, I started looking into Sandra's past behavior in the HOA. I talked to people Dave connected me with through the online petition. The stories were consistent. Selective enforcement, using rules to punish people she didn't like, arbitrary decisions. She'd fined the Millers for having a bluebird house that wasn't approved wildlife habitat. She'd made the Johnsons cut down a healthy tree because she didn't like the shade it cast on her prize-winning petunias. It wasn't just me. She was a menace. Rich, true to his word, introduced me to a former law clerk of his, a sharp, young lawyer named Sophia. When she heard the details, especially about Mom's condition and the destroyed tablet, she was outraged. "This is unconscionable," she said, her eyes flashing. She agreed to represent me pro bono, taking the case out of a sense of justice. Having a lawyer, even a pro bono one, felt like a game changer. The neighborhood felt like a powder keg. Justice for Ferdinand signs, some hand-drawn by kids, started appearing in yards. Small acts of solidarity. The line was drawn. You were either with Sandra or against her, and more people were starting to stand against her. Sandra knew I was building a case. She could feel the ground shifting beneath her perfectly manicured feet. The online petition, the whispers, the Justice for Ferdinand signs. It was public pressure, something she clearly wasn't used to. She started damage control, HOA style. An emergency HOA meeting was called, announced with less than 48 hours' notice. The agenda: review and propose amendments to strengthen existing bylaws regarding property aesthetics and community standards. In other words, make the rules even stricter to shut down any future defiance. Mike, Sophia, Dave, Ray, Elaine, and a dozen other fed-up neighbors showed up in force. The clubhouse was packed. Sandra, at the head of the table, looked visibly annoyed by the turnout. She started the meeting, trying to rush through the proposed amendments. But Sophia was ready. She raised procedural objections, citing violations of the HOA's own bylaws regarding proper notice and public comment periods for rule changes. Dave backed her up, armed with printouts of the relevant rules I'd finally bothered to read. Ray chimed in, asking pointed questions about the cost and feasibility of enforcing such draconian new rules. Elaine, emboldened by the crowd, quietly seconded several of Sophia's points. Sandra was flustered. Her usual imperious control was slipping. She tried to gavel everyone down, but the resistance was too organized, too unified. We were creating procedural roadblocks, slowing her down, exposing her overreach. In the middle of the chaotic meeting, Sandra's husband, a meek-looking man who usually hovered silently in the background, cleared his throat. "Sandra," he said hesitantly, "maybe we should just offer to pay for the tablet, privately. Avoid all this." Sandra turned on him, her eyes blazing. "Absolutely not, George. That would be admitting fault. She was careless with her device." The tension in the room was thick. And then Mom wandered in. She'd been in the car with me, quiet, thinking we were going somewhere else. I'd forgotten about the meeting in the heat of the procedural battle. She stood in the doorway, looking around at the crowded room with wide, confused eyes. "Mike?" she said, her voice small. "Why are all these people here? Is this a party?" My heart ached. "No, Mom, it's just a meeting. I'll take you home." I started to go to her. Sandra scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Perhaps people who can't take care of themselves shouldn't be wandering into community meetings, or living in a neighborhood with standards." A collective gasp went through the room. The tide turned decisively. The murmurs of discontent swelled into outright disapproval. People who had been on the fence, or even quietly supporting Sandra, now looked horrified. And then Rich Harrison, who had been sitting quietly in the back, stood up. The room fell silent. All eyes were on him. He wasn't a big man, but he radiated authority. "Sandra," he said, his voice calm but carrying through the room like a bell. "My name is Richard Harrison. I live next door to Mike and Barbara Lawson. For 30 years, I had the honor of serving as a district court judge. I specialized in civil disputes, including those involving property law and, yes, homeowners associations." He paused, letting that sink in. Sandra's face went pale. The other board members looked stunned. "I witnessed the incident with Barbara's memory tablet," Rich continued, his voice steady. "I saw you confront Mr. Lawson over a garden gnome. I saw you bump his mother. I saw the device fall and shatter. I also have a copy of the doorbell camera footage of the event, which I have reviewed." He looked around the room, his gaze meeting the eyes of the other residents. "What I have also observed over the past several months is a pattern of behavior from the HOA presidency that appears to be arbitrary, selectively enforced, and arguably constitutes harassment. He held up a hand, stopping Sandra as she tried to interrupt. Your actions, Sandra, in destroying a necessary medical device belonging to a vulnerable member of this community, and then attempting to fine her son for a minor bylaw infraction in the aftermath, are not just petty. In my professional opinion, they are unconscionable and potentially expose this HOA to significant legal liability. He didn't yell, he didn't rant. He simply laid out the facts, his legal background lending immense weight to his words. It was a calm, devastating takedown. The meeting ended in chaos. Residents were openly talking, shaking their heads. Sandra, defeated and exposed, grabbed her things and stormed out, her husband trailing behind her. The next morning, just as I was about to leave for an appointment with Dr. Chen for Mom, I saw a tow truck pulling up to my curb. The driver got out, a clipboard in hand. "Mike Lawson?" he asked. "Got a tow order here. Vehicle parked illegally." I looked at my car. It was parked in my driveway, maybe 2 inches over the edge of the sidewalk. 2 inches. Sandra stood on her porch, arms crossed, a smug expression on her face. Retaliation, pure and simple. Rich came over as the tow truck driver was hooking up my car. He watched, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, a faint smile touched his lips. "Well," Rich said, turning to me, "now she's just making our case stronger." Preparing for small claims court with Sophia felt like building a puzzle. We laid out all the pieces. The receipt for the tablet, Dr. Chen's letter, the doorbell camera footage, photos of the shattered device, printouts of the HOA bylaws Sandra had cited, and copies of the violation notices. Sophia organized everything meticulously. She explained how I needed to present the facts clearly, chronologically, and focus on the impact of Sandra's actions. Sandra, meanwhile, wasn't going down without a fight. A letter arrived from a fancy law firm representing her, threatening a countersuit for harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It was a bullying tactic designed to intimidate me into backing down. Sophia just laughed. "Standard procedure for bullies when they're cornered," she said, dismissing the threat. "It shows she's rattled." More neighbors came forward, emboldened by Rich's public stand and Sophia's involvement. They shared their own stories of Sandra's unreasonable rules and petty punishments. The Millers with their bluebird house, the Johnsons and their tree, the Petersons whose perfectly fine fence was deemed non-conforming. Sophia took statements, building a picture of a pattern of abuse of power. My work situation got more tense. My boss was patient, but the missed deadlines were impacting the business. He called me into his office. "Mike, I understand what you're going through," he said, his voice sympathetic but firm. "But we need you here. We need you focused. If this continues, I don't know what we'll have to do." The threat of losing my job hung in the air. The financial pressure mounted again. Ray, the contractor, meanwhile, had been doing his own kind of reconnaissance. He called me, practically buzzing with suppressed excitement. "Mike, you are not going to believe what I found," he said. "Remember how Sandra's always on everyone's case about building codes and permits?" "Yeah." "Turns out," Ray said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "she built that sunroom on the back of her house 5 years ago, without a permit, and it's about 18 inches over the legal setback line." I grinned. Bingo! The Queen of Bylaws had broken a major one herself. It felt like a small victory in the midst of everything. The hardest part was still Mom. Without the tablet, her confusion was more constant. The good days were fewer and further between. She missed the reminders, the familiar photos, the sense of control it gave her. I tried to compensate. I made handwritten memory cards, large index cards with pictures of family members and their names, simple reminders like "take your pills now" and directions to the bathroom or kitchen. It wasn't the same, but it helped a little. Seeing her struggle, seeing the frustration and fear in her eyes when she couldn't remember something basic, fueled my determination to fight for her. This wasn't just about a tablet anymore. It was about protecting her, about standing up for her dignity. Then Sandra tried the nice approach. She called me. I almost didn't answer. "Mike," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'm calling to apologize about the unfortunate incident with your mother's tablet." I stayed silent, waiting. "It was an accident, of course," she continued, her tone shifting slightly. "She really needs to be more careful, but I understand it was important to her. Perhaps we could discuss a reasonable settlement to avoid all this unpleasantness. These lawsuits and petitions are really causing a stir in the neighborhood, you know. It's not good for property values." Her apology was just a thinly veiled attempt to blame Mom and stop me from going to court, all while stressing the impact on property values. The nerve. "Too late for sorry, Sandra," I said, my voice flat. "See you in court." I hung up before she could reply. The night before the court date, I was running through the case in my head, nervous and keyed up. Mom was in bed, but I heard her door open. I found her standing in the hallway, dressed in her clothes from earlier that day, a small suitcase in her hand. "I need to go home, Mike," she said, her eyes wide and a little panicked. "It's getting late. I need to go home now." My heart sank. She was trying to go back to her old house, the one we'd sold months ago, the one she thought was still her home. "Mom," I said softly, going to her. "You are home. This is your home now, remember? You live with me." She looked at me, her brow furrowed with confusion. "But my bed isn't here, and Ferdinand isn't here." "Yes, he is, Mom. Ferdinand is here. Your bed is here. Everything is here. You're safe." I gently took the suitcase from her. She started to cry, a quiet, heartbroken sound. "I just want to go home," she whispered. I hugged her close, stroking her hair. The weight of her illness, the injustice of the situation, the stress of the upcoming court case, it all pressed down on me. But holding her, feeling her frail body tremble, I knew I was doing the right thing. I had to fight for her right to live in peace, for her dignity, for the simple comfort of having her memory aid back. "I know, Mom," I whispered. "I know. We'll get through this. I promise." I stayed with her until she fell back asleep, sitting by her bed, holding her hand. I looked at the handwritten memory cards scattered on her nightstand. Sandra had taken away her technology, her modern memory, but she couldn't take away the love, the fight, the deep-seated sense of right and wrong my mother had instilled in me. I wouldn't let her win. Small claims court felt nothing like the dramatic courtroom dramas you see on TV. It was a small, stuffy room with fluorescent lights and worn linoleum floors. The judge sat at a raised bench, looking tired but attentive. I was nervous, my palms sweating, my neatly organized evidence feeling flimsy in my hands. Sandra arrived with a lawyer, a sleek, expensive-looking man in a sharp suit. My heart sank again. She'd brought out the big guns. Her lawyer immediately tried to get the case dismissed, arguing that a small claims court wasn't the appropriate venue for a complex dispute involving HOA bylaws and alleged property damage. Then, the judge glanced into the audience. His eyes landed on Rich Harrison, who was sitting quietly in the back row, a calm presence in the tense room. The judge did a double-take. He leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Harrison," the judge said, a note of surprise and deference in his voice. "Is that you?" Rich gave a small nod. "It is, Judge Davies. Just here to observe." Judge Davies smiled. "Well, it's an honor to have you. You taught me a great deal back when I was a clerk." He paused, looking from Rich to me, then to Sandra and her lawyer. Given Mr. Harrison's expertise in civil matters and his presence here as an observer, I believe this court is perfectly capable of hearing this case. Motion to dismiss denied. Sandra's lawyer looked annoyed. I felt a tiny surge of hope. I presented my case. I spoke simply, telling the story from my perspective. I explained about Mom's Alzheimer's, the necessity of the tablet, showing the receipt and Dr. Chen's letter. I played the doorbell camera footage. The judge watched intently, his expression neutral, but I could see his gaze linger on Mom's confused face and the tablet shattering on the concrete. I talked about the impact on Mom, her increased confusion, the lost data, the financial strain. I focused on the human cost. Sandra's lawyer argued that the tablet was simply dropped accidentally, that I was exaggerating its value and importance, and that the real issue was my violation of HOA rules with the gnomes. Sandra herself spoke, portraying herself as a reasonable HOA president, simply trying to uphold community standards against a difficult resident. She was calm, polished, a stark contrast to her behavior in the emergency meeting. Then, Sophia called her one witness, a surprise witness even to me, Sandra's husband, George. George looked terrified. He wrung his hands, avoiding eye contact with Sandra. Sophia questioned him gently. "Mr. Wheeler," Sophia said, "were you present when the incident involving the tablet occurred?" George swallowed. "Yes, I was inside, but I heard it." "And did you discuss the incident with your wife afterward?" George hesitated, glancing at Sandra, who was glaring at him. He took a deep breath. "Yes, we talked about it." "And during that conversation," Sophia's voice was quiet but clear, "did your wife say anything about how the tablet was broken?" George looked down at his hands. His voice was barely a whisper. She said she knocked it out of Barbara's hands. She said she was tired of that old woman's excuses." The courtroom was silent. Sandra's face went from pale to ashen. Her lawyer looked like he'd been punched. George's testimony changed everything. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. Petty, cruel, and deliberate. Judge Davies looked at Sandra, his expression stern. He then looked at the broken tablet on the table. He was clearly sympathetic to my case, to Mom's plight, but he was bound by the limits of small claims court. He couldn't award millions or punish Sandra for her cruelty in a legal sense beyond the scope of the claim. He delivered his judgment. He found in my favor, stating that the evidence clearly showed Sandra Wheeler was directly responsible for the destruction of the tablet. He awarded me the maximum damages allowed in small claims court, plus court costs. It wasn't enough to cover the full replacement cost of the tablet, let alone the cost of data recovery. Sandra looked smug as the judge read out the amount. It wasn't the crushing financial blow I had hoped for. She'd gotten away with it, mostly. As we left the courthouse, walking out into the bright sunlight, a woman with a microphone and a camera person approached me. "Mr. Lawson?" she said. "I'm Jennifer Adams with Channel 7 News. I heard about your story from the neighborhood online petition, the one about the HOA president and your mother's memory tablet. Would you care to comment?" I looked at Sophia, who nodded. I looked back at Jennifer Adams, then back towards the courthouse where Sandra was likely still inside with her lawyer, feeling victorious. A different kind of justice was about to be served. The news story went viral. HOA president destroys Alzheimer patient's medical device over garden gnome dispute, the headline screamed. The doorbell camera footage, showing the incident in stark reality, played on repeat. Dr. Chen's letter, explaining the medical necessity of the tablet, added weight to the story. The online petition, with hundreds of signatures and comments detailing Sandra's other abuses of power, provided context. The backlash against Sandra was swift and brutal. Comments poured in online, outraged by her cruelty and pettiness. National news outlets picked up the story. The neighborhood, once divided, largely united against her. She became a pariah. An emergency HOA board meeting was called. This time, there were no procedural roadblocks needed. The pressure was immense. Facing a vote of no confidence and potential legal action from residents who were now emboldened to speak out, Sandra was forced to resign as HOA president. Elaine, the quiet board member who had shown me support, was elected as the new president. Her first action was to formally approve my memory garden plans, waiving any fees or further review. The community, wanting to help, organized a fundraiser for Mom's new tablet. People I barely knew donated generously. The local news station even promoted it. We raised 3 times the amount needed for a new, improved tablet. The surplus donations went to the local Alzheimer's Association, a small beacon of good born from Sandra's cruelty. Sandra's house went up for sale a few weeks later. She couldn't face the neighborhood she had terrorized. With the extra funds, I started a neighborhood memory support group, using the clubhouse for meetings. It was a place for caregivers to share their experiences, offer support, and learn about resources. Officer Diaz even attended one meeting, sharing information about local services. Ray, the contractor, true to his word, showed up with his crew on a Saturday. They weren't charging me. "Consider it a community service," he grunted, a smile on his face. They built the memory garden in a single weekend. A beautiful, peaceful space with fragrant herbs, soft textures, and a winding path. Mom had a particularly good day the afternoon the garden was finished. She walked through it, her fingers trailing over the leaves. She smiled. And then she spotted something. Her collection of garden gnomes, retrieved from storage and placed carefully amongst the new plants. She knelt down, her movements a little stiff, and picked up Ferdinand, his red hat still slightly askew. She smiled, a wide, joyful smile that reached her eyes. "Ferdinand," she whispered. She placed him in a place of honor, right by the entrance to the garden. That evening, the neighborhood gathered in the memory garden. It had quickly become a community gathering spot. Kids ran along the paths, neighbors chatted, the air was filled with laughter and the scent of lavender. Rich Harrison stood up, holding a glass of lemonade. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass, "to good neighbors, and to justice prevailing in ways we sometimes don't expect." We all cheered. Looking around, I saw the transformation. My yard, once a source of conflict, was now a place of beauty and connection. The neighborhood, once divided by petty rules and fear, was now united by empathy and support. And me? I had gone from trying to avoid conflict at all costs to standing up for what was right, for my mother. And in doing so, I had found my voice and found a community. Mom, sitting on a bench with her new, improved tablet in her lap, had a moment of clarity. She looked towards the few neighbors who had remained loyal to Sandra, standing awkwardly near the edges of the garden. "My son always fights for what's right," she said, her voice clear and strong, carrying through the quiet evening air. I remembered that, even when I forgot his name. A hush fell over the garden. It was a powerful moment, a testament to the enduring strength of a mother's love and a son's determination. Sandra had broken her tablet, but she hadn't broken her spirit, or ours. 6 months have passed since the court day, since Sandra's hasty departure, since the memory garden bloomed. The neighborhood feels different, lighter. The tension is gone. The memory garden has become a regular gathering spot, for coffee in the mornings, for kids to play in the afternoons, for quiet contemplation. I volunteer regularly at the local Alzheimer's support group, sharing my experience with the tablet and the importance of technology in caregiving. It feels good to help others navigate the confusing, often lonely road of caring for a loved one with dementia. Rich Harrison and I have become close. He comes over most Sunday afternoons, and we play chess on my back porch, the sound of Mom humming inside a comforting backdrop. He's become something of a surrogate father figure, offering quiet wisdom and unwavering support. He still gardens, of course. His tomatoes are legendary in the neighborhood. Sandra's house sold quickly. A young family with 2 little girls bought it. The girls were fascinated by the garden gnomes, which I had left in the memory garden. They even added a few of their own, little plastic dinosaurs that now roam peacefully alongside Ferdinand and Bartholomew. It felt right. A new beginning, free from the shadows of the past. Mom still has her good days and bad days. Alzheimer's doesn't just disappear, but the new tablet, with its clearer interface and improved features, has made a difference. And the community support, the neighbors who stop by to say hello, the volunteers from the support group who visit, it all helps. She feels more connected, more secure. Just the other day, I found a new note saved on her tablet. A simple sentence, written in her slightly shaky hand. Ferdinand and I are home. My son made sure of it. And I know, no matter what the future holds, that's a memory neither of us will ever lose.